So in order to get started with WebSockets, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a WebSocket server that already exists. So if you actually do a search for WebSockets and echo, one of the things that'll come up is this site that I actually have open over here. And what it allows you to do is actually connect to a WebSocket, and it's giving you a log of your connection with the WebSocket, and you could send some data to the WebSocket and end up getting a response back. Now, this is different than making an HTTP request, even though an HTTP request actually starts that connection. And the difference is that you're actually sending a message to the WebSocket, but the WebSocket has the ability to push notifications to you. So it's a two-way channel, which we'll end up demonstrating. But one of the things that I'm going to end up doing, so on this page also has some very basic code to get a WebSocket set up. And although we could and probably would in a production application use a library that would allow us to do this, one of the things that I want to talk about is that under the hood, it's basically whatever is supported by the browser. So the reason even any of these libraries that we use for WebSockets, we're able to use them because underlying this is the ability in the browser itself to create a WebSocket. So even on this sample page, you can see that there's no external scripts that are being used. This is just native support really for the WebSocket. So I'm going to create an Express app that really is going to do nothing more than connect to this WebSocket and basically allow us to send a notification to the WebSocket, and the WebSocket is going to receive our message, and it's going to then do a notification to us, just echoing out the response, just so we can see, so we can get started. I've got a folder here, nothing in it. Let me do an npm init, because I'm actually going to deploy this as well, so we can see what issues you'll run into for deploying. And the only thing that I'm going to use here is going to be Express. And let me create a server.js file and also an index.html file. These are going to be the only things we're going to work with. We're going to actually put everything in line on the page just to keep things simple. So most basic Express server we can do here. Require Express. We'll create the app. We'll do a get. And for this, we're not even going to use a templating engine. What we're going to end up doing is we're going to tell our response to send a file. This will synchronously load this file, read this file, and it needs a full path. So we'll say path.join, directory name, index.html, and let's bring in our path module, and we'll start our web server by listening, and we'll do process environment port 3000. Again, we're going to want to deploy this as well, and I'm just going to keep this simple. I'm not even going to put a message here, and go over here and run nodemon server. In which case my server will start. If I went over here, localhost 3000, I'm not going to see much of anything because I have nothing on my index page, but just put a couple of things here. And let's say WebSocket demo. And I should end up seeing that end up showing up here. So this is our basic Express server, and we're going to put some script tags here. And the next thing we'll do is we'll actually create a WebSocket on the client, which is going to be connecting to a WebSocket, which is out here using this URL that we see over here. So I'm going to create a WebSocket. WS equals new WebSocket. If I just did this and I went back to this page and I opened up my tools over here and I reloaded this page, and we look at our console, I'd get an error message, because if you're creating a WebSocket, one thing that you need is one argument, which is, where is the WebSocket? It has to know the server of the WebSocket that you're connecting to. So let's put this in here. This is going to be a string. And let's reload this page. And now we're actually able to connect to this WebSocket. And we can actually even see, if we open up our network and WS, we'll see that we're able to connect to this WebSocket. We don't have any data that's going back and forth at that point, but what we're able to do here is we're able to basically set up a connection to the WebSocket, and there's a couple things that we could test out. One of the things being that there are events that happen with the WebSocket. So one of them being, hey, look, were we able to open a WebSocket? So we could specify WebSocket on connect, and we could give this a function. And I'll just say console.log connected. And if we go back here, and we look at our console, make sure this page ends up reloading, and make sure that I have the correct syntax. I have the wrong event here. Not on connect, on open. And these are really the four things that we could subscribe to: on open, on close, on message, and on error. And if we go and look at this, we'll see that we were able to connect to the WebSocket. And in fact, if we're able to connect to the WebSocket, one of the things that we can't do is we can't send the message unless we are actually connected to the WebSocket. So one thing we could do is, after we end up connecting to the WebSocket, we could send a message to the WebSocket. So let's go over here. We'll actually send something a little bit random. By the way, the context for this, not surprisingly, is going to be the WebSocket itself. And we could do it one of two ways. We could say WebSocket send, and I'm going to say foo bar, and I'm going to put in here math.random so we could see different messages going here. And now I'm going to reload this page again. And if I go and look at the network tab and I open this up, again, it's not multiple connections, it's only this one connection. I'll see that what I'm able to do here is I'm making a call to the WebSocket, and I'm actually getting a response back from the WebSocket. Now, and I should rephrase this. I'm sending a message to the WebSocket, and the WebSocket that's sitting up here on the server is then pushing a message back to us. It's a little bit boring because it's the exact same message, but we'll actually modify it a little bit when we end up creating our own WebSocket. That'll end up giving us back some information. But again, the interesting thing here is that we were able to create this duplex channel with the WebSocket, and just to sort of show you that we're able to get a message back. One of the things that we could do here is that if in fact the WebSocket wants to send a message back to us, we could go over here and we could specify WebSocket on message, and this is going to be a function, and we need to get this message back. So this is actually comes back to us. This ends up coming back to us, and what we'll end up doing here is let's do a console.log, and this comes back to us, and if we want to see the actual data that comes back, we could do this, and what this should end up doing is that if we look at our console here, so this is actually the message that is being pushed to us. And again, it's important. It's not necessarily a request response because theoretically, this WebSocket could have, if it took a number of seconds to push this back to us, we'd end up seeing that delay. So some of this will become a little bit more clear once we end up creating our own WebSocket server that we'll end up connecting to. But it's important to see that you're not limited to your own server. You could, if someone else has a WebSocket set up, you have the ability to connect with it, and you could have this duplex flow of information where you could end up sending a message, and if that WebSocket wants to send you something back, they have the ability to do that. So let's actually, right off the bat, see if we can deploy this up to Heroku. Going to, don't have to get repository yet. Let's set one up. I don't want my node modules going up there, so touch my git ignore and open it up. And I'm going to put in my node modules folder. And let me look at my status. And I can see I don't see my node modules folder, which is good. And I'll say git.add git.commit. And make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to say Heroku create prof WebSocket demo. And I'm going to say git.push Heroku master. And let's open this up. Now, this is loading the page, which is fine. But what will end up happening here is that I've got an exception, and the problem is that Heroku goes over SSL, which most sites do, and the problem is I've got a WebSocket. There's two different protocols for WebSocket. There's WS, which is WebSocket, and there's WSS, which is a secure WebSocket. So we might decide, all right, well, it's not taking WS, it's actually the browser is not allowing this to happen. It's saying, hey, look, this is a secure site. We're not going to allow you to create a WebSocket that's not secure. You might think that we could do something like this. And I'll push this up again. And I'm going to end up reloading this page. And now at this point, this is able to work. Let's just make sure of that. Let's look at our network. I want to make sure this is not caching. And so this WebSocket server is supporting WSS. If it wasn't, it would be a little bit more of a problem. But now actually let's modify things, and we're going to set things up. So we're going to set up within our Express application a WebSocket server, and we're going to be able to send messages to it, and we're also going to have that WebSocket Server push messages to us as well, and we'll then end up deploying that. Now, in order to create a WebSocket server, what we're going to need is a node module that allows us to do this. Now, there are multiple ones that you could end up using. We're going to use a very simple one. And again, it's not a lot of bells and whistles on it, but just to show you it can be fairly simplistic to set this up, we're going to use this WS library. And here is an example of actually creating a WebSocket with Express. So one of the things that you can see here from the documentation is that if you have an Express server, you can create a WebSocket server by passing in that server, and now you have a WebSocket that you could end up making connections to. So a couple of changes we're going to end up making here. One of them being that, and I'm going to hard code this for now, we'll end up changing it. We're going to connect to a WebSocket. This is going to be WebSocket protocol localhost 3000. And if we end up going back, let me close this here, and I'm going to install this because I know I need to install it. I'm not going to use it right away, but I'm going to install WebSocket. That gives me the ability to create a web socket by wrapping around an Express server. And again, you need to do that because there is this HTTP handshake that you start off with an HTTP connection and you get upgraded to WebSocket connection. So I'm going to specify nodemon server. I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to end up reloading this page, and I'll get an error message because in fact I don't have a WebSocket. So let's actually create a WebSocket on our server, and the code is going to look very similar for the server actually, which is const WebSocket require WS, and this shouldn't end up throwing off any errors because we have this installed, our server ends up restarting, but we actually don't have a WebSocket server yet. And what I'm going to do here is that app.listen actually will give us back our Express server, and if we have our Express server here, we could specify that we want to create a WebSocket server, and this is going to be new WebSocket. And this WebSocket library gives us the ability to create a WebSocket server, and all we need to pass into it is a configuration variable to say that our server is going to be this Express server. And again, we need this to initiate the process here, in which case, if we end up doing this, one thing that's interesting is that this message will show up, and we actually are able to send a message to our WebSocket server, but we don't have anything set up on the WebSocket server to have it push a response back to us. So let's actually get that set up. What we're going to do here is just looking at this code. What happens is that if a client WebSocket ends up connecting to our WebSocket server, we're going to be able to find out about it. So let's start off by going in here to our server, and the API is a little bit different here. This is going to be web WSS on connection, and what we end up getting back here is going to be right now we're only really interested in this first value, but we end up getting back a WebSocket. And I'm just going to go over here and say console log someone connected to me. And if we go over here and we reload this page, I could see this message, someone ended up connecting to me. In fact, if I open up even a new browser, there's another connection to the WebSocket. If I refresh this page, it actually connects again to the WebSocket. So one of the things we could do is that once someone ends up connecting to us, we have the ability to then say, all right, well, we have this, and again, it's important to note, this is our WebSocket server. This is the WebSocket that connected to us. We're going to specify a WebSocket. What we want to do is that we're going to end up sending you a message. So I'm going to go and send a message, and we'll just say, welcome. So once we're connected, we could end up doing that. And if we end up doing that, what we should end up seeing here is that after we end up connecting to the WebSocket server, the WebSocket server has the ability to push a notification to us. And just to sort of see that this could be, if we decided to, we could go over here and set a timeout. Just for the sake of argument here, let's go and say we'll have it take a while. Seemed like an eternity. But we could go over here. Again, our server is going to end up rebuilding here. And if we reload this, we won't see this message for a couple of seconds. So we've got the ability to basically push notifications to any client that ends up connecting to us. But let's actually set up our echo, which was similar to what the WebSocket server does. And the way that we're going to end up doing that is that if the WebSocket client sends us a message, we have access to that message. And what we're going to do is we'll end up receiving that message, and we'll just echo it out for them, but we'll do it a little bit differently. Let's just go and we'll capitalize it. So that's the next thing that we'll end up doing. Right now we're able to connect to our WebSocket server. We're able to send messages, but let's actually receive messages. So one of the things we could do is we could say, hey, look, for this WebSocket, if you send me a message, I want to know about it, of course. And for starters, let's just go and receive that message, and we'll do a console.log on the server with that message. In which case, on my client, nothing should really change. I'm still going to have that 2-second delay. But here I could see that this message was sent to me. In fact, if I go and I reload this other page, right, I'll see a different message with a different random number. In order to do something similar to what's on the echo page that we had before, let's actually specify, hey, look, when we end up receiving this message, we're just going to send it back, but we'll send it back to uppercase, just so we can see that we have the ability to do whatever we want to. And again, the way to think about this is that the WebSocket on the client has the ability to push notifications to us, and we have the ability on the server to push notifications back to that client. And that's the whole idea of that duplex channel. So you have the ability, if someone is looking at a page and something interesting happens on the server, and if they've established a WebSocket connection with us, we have the ability to send them some information. And again, we can use JavaScript to update the page for the user. So let's take a look at this. We've got our console open here. And here we'll see this is capitalized, and we still have our 2-second delay here. And that ends up demonstrating the idea of the client being able to send notifications to the WebSocket server, and the WebSocket server being able to push notifications to the client. So the next thing we'll do is let's take a look and see what happens when we end up going to deploy this to Heroku. Usually when I deploy, I'll end up killing my server here, but I'm going to keep it running here for a reason. I'm going to open up a new tab here. Get .status. I made some changes. I'm going to end up let's actually be more descriptive. Added WebSocket server support. And what I'm going to end up doing over here is I'm going to push this up. And let's actually open up Heroku, see what that looks like. So here's Heroku. If we open it up, you can actually see we're able to connect to the web server. And this is kind of an interesting thing, because if we look at it, this connection is WS and this is HTTPS. But one of the things that happens is that since this is the same domain, I should actually rephrase that. I think it's allowing this to happen because this is a local host that we're connecting to. So we're not actually connecting to a WebSocket server that's up on Heroku. We're actually connecting to a local WebSocket server. And just to prove that, here I am on my Heroku site. I'm going to go and I'm going to kill my local server. And I'm going to go and reload this page. And if we look over here at the console, we'll see, hey, look, we can't connect. Again, this is running on the client, and we're not able to connect to localhost because localhost is not running. If I go and restart this again, and this is fine for us running this, but if we wanted to deploy this, we don't want to be hosting our own WebSocket server locally. We want to host our WebSocket server on Heroku. So let's make one quick change so that we are not running a WebSocket server locally, which would be impossible. Let's see this message, and we'll just modify things slightly so we're running this on Heroku. So in order to get this running locally, I'm going to just modify my client, so I don't want this to be fixed. And I'm also going to do this so I don't really have to do this with any environment variables. And just to show you what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say console.log, and the window object has a location. And if you look at all these properties, you'll see that one of them is going to be the origin. So if I end up looking at this locally, let's make sure my web server is running. And I'm going to go back over here and take a look at this. I can see that this is the origin. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to get this to work locally by just replacing window.location.origin, and I'm going to replace the HTTP with a WS. And let's just take a look and see how that works locally. So right now we're not hard coding this anymore. I'll keep this in here for when we deploy to Heroku. And we're still able to connect. And let's see what happens if we end up now deploying this. So I'll keep this open again just for demo purposes. Git.status, git.add git.commit, and we'll say we are going to dynamically set WebSocket server, git.push, Heroku master. Now, hopefully what will happen here is that now on Heroku, if we run this, we'll see that we're able to, sometimes this takes a second to create that connection. All right, lost my screen there for a second. It could take a second to create that connection, but I'll see I'm able to connect, and I could see here I'm connecting on Heroku, and if I go back over here just to prove this, I'm going to end up killing my local web server, and still on Heroku, I should be fine because I'm connecting to the WebSocket server on Heroku. I can see my console.log, and the reason why this works is that I'm just replacing the HTTP with WS. So if it turns out that I was on HTTPS, I'm still going to be on. I'm going to be on WSS, which is what I want to have happen with Heroku. Otherwise, if I'm running locally, and I go to look here, of course, this is not going to be running. But if I end up doing nodemon server, so again, this is just demoing some of the basics of setting up a WebSocket for a client and setting up a WebSocket server, and also some of the issues that you'll run into in terms of deployment.